Okay, so imagine a busy neighborhood restaurant, right? It catches fire on a Friday night, and the next morning, the owner is just standing out there on the sidewalk.
Yeah, looking at the damage.
Exactly, smelling the smoke, looking at the boarded up windows, and they're doing that math that everyone does after a disaster, tallying up the scorched kitchen, the ruined ovens, the smoke damage. It's a huge, ugly number.
Right, a very visible number.
But here's the thing. That burnt equipment is not what actually closes the restaurant forever. What forces them into bankruptcy is, well, the 11 weeks, the doors stay dark while repairs drag on.
Because the bills don't stop.
Right. The rent is still due. The staff inevitably drift away because, they need to eat, and the regular customers just find a new favorite spot across town. The fire itself was totally survivable. The 11 silent weeks of zero income were not.
That is just a phenomenal way to visualize what we are dissecting today. Because it's those silent weeks that deal the fatal blow, and the data finally proves it happens exactly the same way in the digital world.
Yeah. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are opening up the VolShield Threat Intel Briefing. And if you are a security leader in the trenches, or maybe a non-technical executive sitting on a board of directors, this conversation is tailored directly for you.
We're keeping things completely grounded in facts today. No hype, no fear-mongering, just the numbers.
Exactly. Our mission today is to unpack Verizon's July 2026 Breach Impact Study, or the BIS, which was produced in partnership with CyberAccuView by the exact same team behind the famous Data Breach Investigations Report.
Yeah, the DBIR. And to really set the baseline for this briefing, we need to acknowledge this massive blind spot in our industry, because for years, cybersecurity has just been intensely focused on the mechanics of the attack.
Right, like the 0 days and the tactic.
Exactly, the threat actors.
Yeah.
Essentially, we've been obsessed with studying how the fire starts. But with the release of this 2026 Breach Impact Study, we finally have the hard financial receipts showing what these fires actually cost.
And the counterintuitive reality emerging from this data is that almost every board of directors has just been budgeting for the wrong number.
Completely the wrong number.
Yeah, let's unpack this. Because to understand why we've been budgeting wrong, we have to look at why our previous data was so flawed.
Yeah.
Historically, those massive breach costs you'd see in headlines, they were based on surveys.
Yeah, just asking people.
Right. Researchers would ask companies to estimate their own financial damage after the fact. And asking a company to self-report their losses is kind of like asking someone how much they lost at the casino on the drive home.
The numbers are definitely going to be warped by emotion, PR spin, or just bad guesswork.
Exactly. But this new study completely threw out the surveys.
Right, and that is the crucial shift here. Instead of surveys, the researchers analyzed roughly 70,000 real U.S. cyber insurance claims. And this is from January 2019 to October 2025.
Wow, 70,000 claims.
Yeah. And out of that massive pool, about 38,000 had actual recorded loss payments. So these aren't estimates from an IT director. These are literal dollars that insurance companies genuinely paid out.
The actual receipts.
It is the closest thing we have ever had to an itemized receipt for a cyber attack.
And what really stands out to me in the methodology is that they explicitly focused on median costs rather than average costs, which makes a huge difference.
It is absolutely vital when you're dealing with financial risk. Averages in cybersecurity are just notoriously distorted.
It's because of the outliers, remember?
Exactly. Think about it. If you have 99 normal businesses that suffer a $50,000 loss, and then one massive multinational corporation loses $100 million, your average gets dragged incredibly high.
Yeah, it paints a picture that is totally unrelatable for a standard mid-market company.
Right. But the median finds the exact middle of the pack. It tells you what a typical claim actually looks like for a typical organization on a typical Tuesday.
Okay, so when you look at that typical organization, the jumping cost is just staggering. The median breach cost rose about 80% between 2019 and 2024.
It's a huge leap.
Yeah, it went from roughly $61,000 to about $110,000.
Yeah.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second. We're looking at a timeline that spans a global pandemic and historic supply chain crunches, right? So isn't that 80% jump just standard economic inflation? I mean, everything from groceries to software licenses has gotten more expensive since 2019.
Well, it's a totally logical assumption, but the macroeconomic data actually shoots that theory down completely. U.S. consumer price inflation over that exact same period was only about 23%.
Oh, wow. Okay, so not even close.
Not even close. Breach costs are not just floating up with the natural tide of the economy. They are compounding at a rate more than 3 times faster than the price of everything else.
That is wild.
Yeah, the dataset shows that half of all reviewed paid-out claims are now coming in above roughly $83,000. And for the mid-sized organizations that make up the backbone of the economy, that is a severe, unbudgeted hit to their operating capital.
So if costs are rising 3 times faster than inflation, we have to ask what exactly companies are paying for.
Right.
Where's all this money going?
Right. And the breach impact study categorizes these insured losses into a framework they call the 4 Ls.
Okay, so that's loss to the threat actor, loss due to response and recovery, loss due to external liability, and loss due to business interruption.
Exactly. And breaking those down is where we start to see the divergence between what boards fear and what actually happens.
Let's look at that first one, loss to the threat actor.
Yeah, that's what most people visualize. The actual ransom payment transferred to the extortionist or, funds stolen through wire fraud.
And then loss due to response and recovery.
That covers the emergency room triage, the specialized forensics team you parachute in at 2 in the morning, the outside legal counsel, the crisis PR firm.
Right, I see what you mean. And then loss due to external liability would be the fallout that hits you months later.
Yeah.
Like class action lawsuits from customers or massive regulatory fines.
Exactly.
Oh.
Which leaves the 4th L loss due to business interruption. And this brings us to the central plot twist of the entire study.
The plot twist. I like that. So what is it?
Well, when you ask an executive to picture the devastating cost of a cyber breach, they almost always imagine the ransom note on a dark screen or some crippling government fine making the evening news.
The visible flames of the restaurant fire.
Precisely. But the data reveals a completely different reality. The number one loss driver, the absolute biggest line item on that insurance receipt is business interruption.
The downtime.
Yes, the downtime. It's the lost sales, the idled factory floor, the employees who cannot work but still need to be paid while the network is locked. And it's not just the biggest category, it's the fastest growing.
Wait, how fast is it growing?
Business interruption jumped from representing 21% of known losses in 2023 to 32% in 2024. And it carries the highest median cost of any single category in the study, sitting at $90,000.
That is crazy.
Oh.
And this is where the contrast with the 2026 DBIR companion report is just fascinating. Because the DBIR tracks the actual ransom payments.
Right.
And it turns out the ransom is actually becoming less central to the financial impact. A massive 69% of ransomware victims in the dataset chose not to pay the ransom at all.
Yeah, that refusal rate has been climbing steadily.
And for the minority who did pay, the median ransom actually fell. It went from $150,000 in 2024 down to roughly $140,000.
So if we pull back and look at the whole board, the irony is just glaring. The single line item that executives fixate on, the ransom itself, is statistically flat or falling.
And being outright refused by more than 2/3 of victims.
Right. Meanwhile, the line item that almost nobody adequately budgets for, the operational downtime, is swallowing the lion's share of the financial damage.
We are laser focused on the ransom note and completely blind to the close sign hanging on our own front door.
Exactly, yeah.
The part of the disaster that never makes it into the dramatic PowerPoint presentations is quietly becoming the entire disaster.
It is a profound misalignment of resources. But what's perhaps most interesting is that if we look outside of cybersecurity, this is not a new revelation at all.
No, the broader business world actually learned this lesson over a century ago, and somehow the tech industry just completely forgot it.
Yes, the historical anecdote in the sources is incredible. Back during the gaslight era, long before computers, the property insurance world was watching physical businesses burn down.
And the underwriters noticed a very strange pattern.
They did. Merchants were generally surviving the costs of rebuilding the physical structure after a fire. The insurance paid out. They could replace the wood, the brick, the glass.
Right, the visible damage.
Yeah. But a shocking number of these merchants were going bankrupt anyway, like 6 or 9 months after the building was fully restored.
Because the physical damage was never the real threat to their survival.
Exactly. The threat was that they had absolutely zero revenue coming in during the months the doors were shut for repairs. They still had to pay their suppliers, they had personal living expenses, and their customers formed habits of shopping elsewhere.
And so the insurance industry invented an entirely new product to cover that specific gap. They called it business interruption insurance.
Which we still have today.
Yeah. They realized over 100 years ago that the fire is not the catastrophe. The closure is the catastrophe.
And now, a full century later, Verizon analyzes 70,000 digital claim files and rediscovers the exact same truth, just, wearing a hoodie this time.
Just wearing a hoodie. I love that.
It's true, though. For the last 2 decades, organizations have built their cybersecurity budgets almost exclusively around the burnt kitchen.
Buying tools to stop malware, paying for server repairs, agonizing over ransom payments.
Right. We completely forgot the lesson the insurers learned before the light bulb was even widely adopted. Downtime is the ultimate killer.
But we also have to acknowledge that downtime does not impact every business identically.
Right.
A week of network darkness means something very different for a local medical clinic than it does for a massive global enterprise.
Oh, absolutely. It is a tale of 2 very different realities.
So let's look at how the data breaks down across revenue brackets.
Well, if we just look at the absolute dollars, the losses scale up exactly how you would assume based on the size of the company.
Okay.
The median impact for a small and medium-sized business, an SMB, is about $38,000. For mid-market companies, that jumps to roughly $96,000. And for large enterprises, it scales up to about $283,000.
So hearing those numbers, the natural assumption is that the large enterprises are taking the heaviest punches, right? I mean, they were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars compared to the SMB's tens of thousands.
That is the illusion of absolute numbers. When you analyze the ratio of the financial loss to the company's annual revenue, a much darker picture emerges for the smaller players. In the most severe cases, the extreme top tier of claims, SMBs are facing a hit of up to 7% of their total annual revenue.
7%.
Wow. Yeah. And for mid-market and large enterprises, that ratio never exceeds 2%, even in their absolute worst-case scenarios.
That is a staggering disparity. Think about a local 50-person logistics company. If their routing software gets locked up for a week, their trucks can't roll.
No revenue coming in.
Right. But they still have to pay the drivers, they still have to pay the lease on the warehouse, and they still have to pay their insurance premiums. Taking a 7% hit to gross revenue doesn't just hurt, it easily wipes out their entire profit margin for the year.
They might miss payroll entirely, and that dynamic is exactly what the industry refers to as the cybersecurity poverty line.
The cybersecurity poverty line.
Yeah, smaller organizations simply lack the deep financial shock absorbers and the extensive internal IT armies required to bounce back quickly. Because the recovery drags on longer, the financial bleeding is proportionally devastating. They are absorbing a heavyweight blow while fighting in a lightweight class.
And there is a specific type of incident that amplifies this downtime to an almost unimaginable degree. It's the scenario that really keeps security leaders awake at night.
The software supply chain and third-party vendor breach.
Exactly.
This is one of the most critical findings in the BIS. When a breach arrives not through a direct targeted attack on your own network, but through a shared software supply chain or a trusted third-party vendor, the financial dynamics shift radically.
Yeah, in those incidents, business interruption balloons to represent a massive 50% of all the reported losses. Half of the entire cost is just the downtime.
Right.
And while these incidents are relatively rare, I mean, they only make up about 2% of the claims in the data set, they are absolutely brutal when they happen.
Brutal is the right word.
They carry a median impact of roughly $252,000, which is more than double the median of the overall data set. And for the worst 2.5% of these supply chain claims, the losses blew past the $100 million mark.
It's incredible.
So why are these specific breaches so uniquely catastrophic?
It really comes down to the nature of the interruption and the total lack of control. When a shared software vendor or a major cloud service provider goes down, the interruption is simultaneous across their entire customer base.
So, to go back to the restaurant analogy, it's no longer just your kitchen catching fire.
No, it is the power grid for the entire street, the entire neighborhood, going completely dark at the exact same moment.
And you can't just call an electrician to fix your own building.
Exactly. You are entirely at the mercy of the third party's incident response team. The timeline for turning the lights back on is out of your hands. You are burning money every single hour, waiting for a vendor to fix their house before you can even begin to reopen yours.
So if we know that the true cost of a breach is the downtime, and especially the uncontrollable downtime from vendors, how do we actually defend against that? Like, how must security leaders and business executives change their strategy today?
The primary takeaway is a fundamental shift in perspective within the boardroom. Resilience is no longer just an IT metric, right? It is a core profit and loss strategy.
A P&L imperative.
Exactly. If business interruption is your largest financial exposure, then every single dollar you spend on reducing downtime is a dollar actively protecting the bottom line.
This means we have to stop talking to the board about firewalls and start talking about recovery speed.
Yes.
We've established that every hour you shave off the restoration process is a direct cut to your single largest breach cost. So how does a company practically do that?
First, you have to know your RTO, your recovery time objective, and you have to test it relentlessly.
And your RTO is the theoretical amount of time it takes to get your critical systems operational again.
Key word there being theoretical, because having an RTO written in a binder somewhere means absolutely nothing.
Right, it's just paper.
Exactly. If you have never run a full-scale, sweat-inducing drill to prove you can actually hit that target, then your actual downtime cost is simply whatever the attacker decides it's going to be.
Oof. That's a scary thought. And that ties directly into the technology that supports that recovery, specifically immutable backup.
Yes.
The study emphasizes this, and it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. But why is it the ultimate safety net?
Because of how it physically functions. Immutable means the data is governed by a write once, read many architecture.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice?
It means the backup server itself mathematically rejects any command to alter, encrypt, or delete the data for a set retention period.
Oh, wow. So even if they try, they can't.
Right. So when the attacker's ransomware script inevitably tries to scramble your backups along with your primary data, the system simply refuses the command.
That's huge.
It is. Having offline, immutable, routinely tested backups is the highest leverage investment in the entire security budget. It is the literal difference between a minor 24-hour disruption and a catastrophic month-long outage.
But technology fails,
Yeah.
right? Or, as we discussed with the supply chain, the vendor might be down for weeks, regardless of your own backups.
Which brings us to the next step. That means companies need robust business continuity plans that do not rely on the network.
Right. You have to know exactly how your business is going to process orders, track inventory, or serve patients manually while the digital systems are completely dark.
The organizations that survive are the ones that figured out their paper and pencil fallback plans before the fire started, not while the kitchen is burning.
Which requires mapping your critical vendors meticulously. You need to identify every third-party software or service that has the power to take your operation offline if they get breached.
Yes, and once you have that map of unexploded landmines, you have to build a bypass for each one.
This completely changes the conversation that a chief information security officer needs to have with their board. I mean, you can't walk into that room and lead with, here is our plan to avoid paying a ransom.
No, the receipts prove that is just the wrong focus.
You need to walk in, put the operational map on the table, and ask, how many days of total system darkness can this business survive? And exactly what does each one of those days cost our profit margin?
That is the crucial pivot right there. You are translating cyber risk into business language. You have to align the board's understanding of a breach with the actual financial reality of how these events drain the company's capital.
So, to bring this all together, the bottom line is a lesson that took a century to learn twice.
Unfortunately, yes.
The insurance industry has known since the days of horse-drawn carriages that disasters do not bankrupt businesses at the exact moment of impact.
No.
They bankrupt them slowly, in the terrible silence afterward, one dark, inoperable day at a time. The 2026 Breach Impact Study just proved the modern digital version of this, using 70,000 hard receipts.
The evidence is undeniable now.
The ransom was never the bill. The regulatory fine was never the bill. The bill is the time you cannot operate.
And as we look toward the horizon, there's a final thought I want to leave you with, connecting this back to the DBIR. We know that generative AI is now actively bolstering threat actors at every single stage of the attack lifecycle.
Right, making them faster and more efficient.
Exactly. They are using AI to discover vulnerabilities, write exploits, and execute attacks vastly faster than human defenders can ever hope to patch them.
The fire's moving faster than the fire department.
Exactly. And as breaches become statistically inevitable due to this acceleration, it really changes how we measure corporate strength.
How so?
Well, perhaps the ultimate measure of a company's market valuation in the near future won't just be its top-line revenue or its intellectual property or its market share. Perhaps it will be its verifiable speed of operational resurrection.
Wow. operational resurrection.
Right. If we accept that the fire is going to happen eventually, is your recovery speed your greatest competitive advantage?
That is the exact question you need to be asking yourself the next time you look at your security budget. Are you just buying more fire extinguishers, or are you actually building a blueprint to get the doors open and the lights on the very next morning? Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the VolShield threat intel briefing. Stay resilient, stay curious, and stay safe.